Hello?
Hi, this is Gene Shalit. I'm having a bad hair day. If you don't believe me, look out the window.
It stinks!
And welcome back to Sons and Shadows Cast. We're a podcast that delves into forgotten and canceled TV series. It's time to remember, relive, and revisit. Let's keep that memory alive and never let them be forgotten. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined by
your co-host, Kevin Smith.
All right, thanks, Kevin. On this week's podcast, we have the story of Jay Sherman, New York's third best film critic. In this animated series, we get a fun parody of film, TV industry, and the critic within them. There are plenty of hijinks and crazy characters to boot. This was a show that originally started on ABC, but then was canceled and moved over to Fox, which found itself to be canceled yet again, only to be revived a few years later in a web series. It doesn't stink, but plenty of the networks do. This is John Lovett's The Critic. And we have a special guest joining us this time. We are joined by film critic extraordinaire, Robert Yanez Jr. of Crooked Table Productions. You would be familiar with his podcast, Franchise Detours and Close Watch. His insights into film and uncanny ability to have engaging talks is unmatched. Thank you, Rob, for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, and you can tell already by that intro why this, how this show impacted me in the 90s and where I am today. It's about a critic in his mid to late 30s, dealing with what it means to be a critic in the 90s and in the modern world, and it feels very, very relevant, especially now to me.
Does it still feel like the same show now?
Yeah, exactly.
Now is this essentially what made you choose the critic for this topic? Because we usually let our guests, when they come on, choose what they're going to talk about. And you had some other choices, but is this the one that you were secretly hoping for, or what made you choose this?
Well, I mean, initially we had something in mind that wasn't going to be workable in the current climate. And I was even thinking it before you brought that to my attention. Yeah. And there's not a lot of TV shows that I have on DVD. Usually it's like, full series like Seinfeld, or, I was really big into Family Guy, a show which we probably will talk about quite a bit in this episode in a very different context. And I know that, the whole premise of the show is kind of spotlighting shows that were gone too long, gone too soon. And this is one that I've seen a lot. Like, this was one of the first TV DVD box sets I bought like on Amazon when I started my Amazon account. Like, when this came out, like I was right on it. Like I ordered this box set immediately when it came out, because I remember seeing this show quite a bit. So when we were discussing having me on the show, and I was looking over at my DVD shelf, and I was like, well, there's this one little box set for The Critic, and there's all of these other box sets of seasons of ongoing long-running television shows. I'm like, well, The Critic, and I have, just in the lead up to this episode, you guys have been teasing this conversation, and a lot of people are bringing up the exact same things that I've said forever, that like this show is wildly ahead of its time. And I think it's worth kind of digging it back up to be like, hey, you remember all that stuff that now is so popular in animated comedies? Remember when that happened in the 90s and nobody paid attention to it? Well, I do. And so that was sort of the idea in bringing this one up, just because it feels like, they could reboot this tomorrow, and it would just be it could be almost the exact same show with the addition of technology and that kind of thing.
See, I kind of remember this show from when it first came out a few years ago, like back in the 90s. It was sandwiched between Home Improvement. I remember that. Beyond that, though, I don't remember this being on like Fox. When I knew there was a second season, it was when we were discussing this show. I'm like, oh, wow, I completely fell off the map on following the life of this show. I didn't even know there was a web series after that. So I never got around to watching that, so for this podcast, but I did get through the other two seasons, and it was a fun trip. But I kind of remembered an episode or two, and it was a fun watch.
Just because I'm curious, which were the episode or two you remembered? Because I have a feeling that there's certain ones that really stick out in people's minds.
Dial M for Mother.
Nice.
It is the first one. The other one, it was Doris's big day.
Okay.
Keep Dial M for Mother in the back of your head for later in the show. We'll come full circle. I promise. It's coming.
Now, Kevin, did you watch this back in the day, or was this new for you?
I did. I do remember watching this in 94. I think I was a freshman in high school at this point. But I don't remember it being on ABC. That's what was shocking is when we were telling people initially that, yeah, we're going to talk about the Critic. People were saying, well, what network was that on? And I said, Fox. And Jeff stepped in and said, actually, it was on ABC first. And my jaw kind of dropped like, oh, I'll be goddamned. Because I always just remembered it being like a sister show to The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And that's how I looked at it anyways. So I didn't remember it being on ABC, but I do remember watching it on Fox. And the one line that always stuck out with me, I never, ever forgot it, was I think maybe the second episode where his dad gets up on a podium and goes, if I was a vegetable, I'd be a carrot. Just, I don't know why. That was just the most random shit I'd ever heard. And it stuck with me all the years. So I was greatly excited to hear that part again.
Franklin has some of the best, most random one-liners. Like there's one early on, I don't know if it's the same episode, but it's around there where he's like, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Who are you people?
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
And I like how they have to tell people that he had a stroke just to try to make an excuse for how he is.
Any other favorite lines you guys have?
Mine, the whole thing, out of the whole series, mine was where there's an episode where Jay tries to make an art film and everybody hates it. It was just terrible. And he goes to the film professor and he asks, why wasn't it good enough for you? And he tells him, Jay, you were not meant to create. You were meant to pick apart what others put their hearts and souls into. You weren't born to make things. You were born to tear them apart. And I thought to myself, yes, God damn it. Yes, that's what we do.
That's one of my favorites. Yep.
That brings up an interesting point that I want to make sure we get into. Like, where do you think this show stands on critics? Because on the one hand, there's things like that are sort of skewering the concept of criticism. But then at the same time, it's set in like this fantasy world where every film critic is a major celebrity, which I think is hilarious in and of itself. Do you think it's pro or con critics in general?
Ooh, I would say it's a little more on the pro side because it's trying to give a little more insight to the life of a critic and how they see the rest of the world, or at least Jay, but Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, how they did that episode in the Fox season was excellent.
Yeah.
So, but it also does show it doesn't show them in the best of light, but it shows that they have a human side to them. They're not just critics. They all have their own flaws and their strengths.
Some of them.
I was going to say, I feel like that episode is one of the ones that really stuck out to people. Like that's one of the ones I see referenced the most when people are like, oh, that episode with Siskel and Ebert where they had them voice themselves. And it's sort of like a rom-com of getting Siskel and Ebert back together again. That
turned out to be probably my favorite episode of the whole show when I just did my watch for this. So I love that. Evan, did you have a comment or a thought?
No, I lost it. Whatever it was, just went, boo, I was listening to you guys and went, oh yeah, they're right.
This show got canceled from ABC and Fox, and it was rumored to go to UPN, but Fox never officially canceled the show. So what do you think would have happened if it had gone to UPN? Do you think it would have stuck around more, or would have fallen into the obscurity of what was UPN at that time? I'm curious on the timeline with that. I guess it would have
it might have stuck around for a couple more seasons. I know, what is it, like the early 2000s when UPN and WB merged into CW. So like right around there. I don't know exactly. It's hard to say because I feel like it suffered the exact same fate that, again, Family Guy did, where Family Guy was canceled multiple times before being released on DVD. And the success of those box sets is why they decided to release this series in the first place on DVD. And so I think I don't know. I feel like it was, people weren't ready for it in the same way that people weren't in attuned to what Family Guy was trying to do, which was so similar to this and The Simpsons, obviously, at the same time. So I don't know. I'd have a hard time seeing it stick around because a lot of the things that we're talking about, the movie parodies and the kind of the satire of Hollywood and sort of its examination of criticism as an art form or lack thereof, I think is really kind of attracts more of a niche audience than mainstream.
Excellent answer, sir.
Oh, thanks.
Me personally, I would think like UPN, if it had gotten over to UPN, it probably would have been like most other shows on there. It might have gone a season or two, but unless you're the powerhouse of Star Trek with the full financing of Paramount behind you, with Voyager, it's not gonna last very long because other shows that were similar to it on UPN, there was one called Road Trip, I believe. There was one, they had Celebrity Deathmatch on there, which ended up going to MTV, and a whole slew of others, and they only lasted like a season or two at most. So it probably wouldn't have lasted as long, but we could have gotten a little more life out of it. My concern would be how much they would have had to have changed the overall direction of the show, and if they had to add more characters or take characters away, like it felt with the second season or the Fox season, as I call it, because once he got a girlfriend with a kid, it did feel like it changed the dynamic of the show up a little bit for me.
And this is where we start playing that buoy bell sound. Ding, ding, ding,
ding, ding, ding.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, they had 3 different phases of the show. The initial stage where you're getting to CJ be a film critic, and that was probably the strongest area. And that's what Roger and Ebert, or Siskel and Ebert would say, focus on the movie critiquing. That's the best part of this show. And then they didn't. They went to the second season, basically jumped the shark and got canceled. But as far as whether or not they would have stuck around in UPN, I would have said no, absolutely not. I think it was too smart for UPN. I'm just going to say it. Most of the shows on UPN ever are for people that could be, you could measure their attention span in nanoseconds. That's how I felt about UPN back then and today. And
There's
if you like
exceptions to that rule. I argue with you. There was shows like 7 Days by Cameron Crowe.
Who? What?
The show 7 Days.
Never saw
from
it.
Cameron Crowe.
I know the name. Not to sound like a putz. I know he's famous. No, I didn't see 7
He's
Days. And I know people like
famous.
Oh, no wonder I don't like that.
Nice.
People are going to hate me for this. I fucking hate that movie. It's so goddamn stupid and boring.
Anyway.
No, but it was too smart for the UPN. UPN had silly sitcoms that had poor scripts. They tried to get some decent actors if they could. Wayne's brothers later on, who I fucking love. I'll never say a bad word about them. But they always mismanaged shit, worse than Fox. And UPN got to a point where they leaned demographically other than Buffy to a certain point. So I don't think the Critic, any type of that intelligent of a picture or show, would have lasted on UPN. UPN just didn't have intelligent enough content for the most part.
So is there anywhere, let's say in the mid 90s after Fox canceled it in 95, where could this show have worked in that time period? Or do you kind of more in line with what I was saying, where it's like, I don't know if it could exist and be successful in the 90s.
I don't know. I mean, Comedy Central at best.
Yeah, that's what my answer would be as well. I wouldn't even say Sci-Fi Channel because it wasn't sci-fi enough.
No, absolutely not. And the only reason why I say Comedy Central is because it fits more in line with MST. It was a visual riff of movies. Like the famous scene that they always have in the intro credits of Alien 3, where it's going up on Ripley and before it opens up its mouth, it comes out with little lips. It goes, and she gets a big smile on her face. I like that visual riff.
Yep.
And that's what Siskel and Ebert said they should have done more of. And I liked that. And I think that would have worked well on Comedy Central. But going into the episodic stories that they did in that second season, I don't know if that would have stuck. I don't know. And with how meta it is, I think it would be better redone today, and it would stick very well.
Yeah.
Because in the 90s, nobody was ready to hear that Hollywood was fucking them in the ass.
Yeah. It was ahead of its time. I would say that for sure.
Like, studios were handing out shit left and right. If you go back and watch 90s movies, most of the 90s films are utter trite. Like, it's absolute shit how corny they are. But that's just what Hollywood gave us, and that's what we ate. And it took a show like this to say, it stinks. This is just rehashed, recycled garbage. And that's most of what the 90s fucking was.
Yeah.
Shit. You watch fucking Mission Impossible 2. You want to know what that was? A 2.5-hour fucking commercial for Tom Cruise's hair.
I do not discuss that movie. That did not happen. Most of those movies didn't happen for me.
That's something that would have fit perfectly in this show, just to have the hair waving and then have something bad happen to it. What it is to me, what this reminds me of, and I know you guys have seen it, and people at home, if you haven't, go to rifftracks.com, watch Rifftracks' intro, where they show basically different sketches of all these different films. You'll see things like Bella and Edward, but then here comes Thor slamming his hammer into a fucking stake in Edward's chest. So it's lots of little riffs like that. Or what was it? Darth Vader roasting weenies with his fucking lightsaber or some shit. They had a lot of like visual type riffs. So I think it would work well today with something like that. I think people are much more ready to see, or are seeing now, that Hollywood is shit. People like Harvey Weinstein in prison.
There was a joke about him in their show too.
Yes, there was. And it also predicted the Expendables.
It's true. It's true.
If you pay attention, they talk about a movie starring Bruce Willis, Sylvester Stallone, and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yep.
There are certain movie parodies from this thing that, like, I still reference today. The Scent of a Wolfman.
Yeah.
Thing with him, like, come on, Charlie, I want a drink. Like that whole thing. The Home Alone 5. We left Kevin Home Alone, and he's only like 42, and it's like,
I love that one. I died laughing.
So
at
good.
that one.
And that's the thing, that the pace of this show is like, I'm not gonna say Seth MacFarlane saw this and copied the cutaway gag concept from it, but he kind of did. Yeah. This is exactly, except for Peter Griffin saying like, this is just like that time I whatever. It's Jay Sherman saying, oh, the new movie this, and then they cut to it and then they come back. Like, it's the exact same format. And the only good thing about the web series, which is on the DVD box set that I have, and it's not great. It doesn't really have, in many of the characters, it's kind of, there's a new makeup lady, because I believe the actress who voiced Doris had passed away about that time, is that they does have some more movie parodies, one of which they do mention Mission Impossible 2, and he does talk about how it makes him like, it's just basically, he's just like invincible the whole movie, and he's like running like with his hair shaking and everything. And Anthony Hopkins, and he's like, Mr. Hunt, you have to go do this mission. He's like, can I have my money now? And it's like, no, not yet. And he's like, how about now? And it's like just Anthony Hopkins basically in the scene with Tom Cruise asking like, can I get paid now so I can get out of here? Kind of thing. So it feels like Anthony Hopkins in that movie. So little things like that, because it was made in 2001, they have a much smaller budget, so the animation is not great. And the Jay's personal life thing is not really super interesting in that either, because there's not a whole lot of it. And what they do have is not that interesting. But the movie parodies, like, we get some updated movie parodies. So for that reason, it's kind of worth at least checking out maybe some YouTube clips or something from it. But it goes to show that kind of thing. You put John Lovitz is in his early 60s now. You sign that up now for Hulu or wherever, and you get a season or two of that on lockdown. I mean, the Animaniacs are back. Like, it's animation. Right. It's all in play. He-Man is back. Like, everything that from the 80s and early 90s, everything is circling back around. So this thing feels very much of the now and not of the 90s. So it's like, why not bring it back? I'm sure John Lovitz would love the paycheck, and all it is voiceover for him. So
yeah, it's just voice work.
It's so good.
And a lot of these performers are still working.
You got Bruce Campbell saying, we got him doing a video game, even though he's officially quote unquote retired from acting for Evil Dead. I'd love to see John Lovitz back. He was the show for me here.
Yeah, 100%. And some of the actors are no longer with us, but we still have Maurice LaMarche still playing the Brain. You bring him back as Jeremy Hawk, which is like a Paul Hogan meets Mel Gibson sort of hybrid. What do you guys think about that character and actually having like his best friend be this famous actor who's really 43 apparently?
Yeah, he's super old. I always liked him. I thought he was ironically funny. Like,
he was great. Yeah.
The counter opposite of Jay, and total narcissist, but sincerely loves Jay.
Yes.
Like that was always the really surprising thing. Like he would always stop his narcissistic ways to help Jay out, like even crossing his own sister.
Yes.
Which was really surprising.
Yeah, I had never seen that episode. When I saw that, I'm like, this is a nice character development for their show. And to all your credits here, like the one comment I saw when I was doing some research on the show was a lot of people said that there's not enough unique characters for people to latch onto. But as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, yeah, there are, but they're a little more on the mature side. So there's barely any kids in this. Yeah, there's Marty, but it's largely, there's a good dichotomy of characters in here to bounce off of. You got the boss, you got the dad, the mom, you got his best friend, you got his love interests throughout the whole season. I mean, there's characters there. Yeah, it's not The Simpsons with 300 characters where you got introduced to 50 of them in its first season or two anyway. So,
but he is one of those 300 characters.
It's true.
That's true. He even plays himself in this show for John Lovitz.
Oh yeah, he does, doesn't he?
Yep.
I meant to watch that episode of The Simpsons just for extra credit, and I missed it. I didn't get a chance
I didn't
to.
get to that either.
The only thing I remember.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the only thing I remember is Homer being so distraught because the kids liked Jay more than he did, and the next thing you see is Marge saying, "No, that's not true." And then here comes Jay and all the kids marching down the top of the stairs. Oh, I wish I was an Oscar Mayer wiener. Homer gets all fucking upset. He even knows my song.
Yeah, a lot of those scenes are on YouTube. I did watch some of them, and I think it's the premise is that Marge writes a letter to Jay to be like a guest at the film festival in Springfield or whatever, and he ends up staying. Jay stays with the Simpsons, and that's where the whole dynamic rivalry, I guess, between him and Homer kind of begins, which is interesting because that's again something that Family Guy does. They do a crossover with the Simpsons where there's like a rivalry sort of initially between Peter and Homer, and then they become best friends, I guess, because it's been a while since I watched that one.
Oh, I was gonna say that was kind of like a comic book team up. Was it that one?
Yeah, exactly. But people forget this is essentially a Simpsons spinoff. The same, Mike Reese and Al Jean.
Yeah,
basically show ran the first like 2 to 3 seasons of The Simpsons, something like that.
Seasons 3 and 4.
There you go. So it's like legit from the same creative team. James L. Brooks involved in both, and as The Simpsons, and it's just like the black sheep of The Simpsons legacy, I guess. Which The Simpsons, which is still on after 30 years or so.
Oh my God, we're way past 30. I think we're on like 32 at this point. I think South Park's the only one close behind it. So,
well, they even borrowed actors from The Simpsons.
Nancy
Cartwright plays Jay's sister, and a couple other different characters.
Christine Cavanaugh is Marty.
Yeah,
is she not in there?
Yes,
right.
And Tress MacNeille as well.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Doris. Doris also played Lunch Lady Doris, on the original Lunch Lady Doris in The Simpsons.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, my research is not without flaw.
Who do we feel like is the MVP of the supporting cast? Because as we're mentioning, the voice cast, which is stellar across the board. Obviously, John Lovitz. This is kind of like the role he was born to play, I would say, to a degree. Is who stands out? Like, who do you think is kind of the MVP of the supporting cast? Because I kind of go back and forth between Garrett Graham, Maurice LaMarche, and Charles Napier, R.I.P. It's really close because they all kind of steal every scene that they're in.
Yeah, they do. Oh God.
Maurice LaMarche, for all the different characters that he played, his Orson Welles, of course, will be forever what he's going to be.
God.
More Orson than Orson.
Yes.
But, eating the peas, take some more for later. That just fucking killed me inside. But I don't know. I would be stuck between Garrett Graham, which last time Robert and I got to hang out, we were talking about him anyway from Child's Play 2.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like you said, Mr. Napier, because he plays a hard ass in everything he's in. He was the lead singer from the Good Old Boys in the Blues Brothers, where he gets down on John Belushi going, "Boy, I'm gonna kick your ass." Just gets right in his face. And you could totally hear that coming through in Duke. And Duke is just hysterical, especially with Doris.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
I think my first choice would be Maurice. Second choice would definitely be Charles Napier. I don't know. I was getting such a kick out of Duke Phillips the entire show. Like, at times you hated him, at times you liked him. It felt like he was a little more, I don't know. I know the description, he's a little Ted Turner-esque. And I kept seeing that. And before I even saw that there was people would describe him as a Ted Turner on steroids. But I liked his episodes when he took over and when he was trying to run for president, and he was following the scripts as they were written until the very end. And then he's like, "That's it. This is how I'm going to run this country." And I'm like, oh my God, this is about 20 years early. Who would you say, Rob, would be for your MVP?
I think based on like the amount of screen time and the amount of dialogue that he has, I think I might have to go Garrett Graham, just because, like we were saying earlier, literally everything that comes out of that character's mouth. Like when we have a flashback to like his first date with Eleanor, which is like, it was like a silent movie or something. And the second season, you get that he's actually, the more the cast is implemented in the opening theme, which, by the way, we got to give a shout out to that awesome Hans Zimmer theme song that he came up with for this. Again, another sort of Simpsons connection there, that he did the music for both. He's like dressed as baby 1937, popping out of the cake, waving his fingers and dancing. Little things. He makes such an impact with such a small role compared to everyone else on the in the show.
Okay, I gotta ask. When I watched the episode where they got stranded on the island, I thought that was completely brilliant. That the whole reason why he's so wacky is because somebody got him. Oh God, who was it? Robert Kennedy got him hopped up on alcohol years prior, and the second he got like sober, he was like this suave, debonair, absolutely charming guy. And at that point, I understood exactly how he became this rich mogul, even though I don't think we ever understood how they got all their money. I mean, I know he was a governor, but I thought that was just a great episode for them to show like a backstory and a current story and kind of bridge things you never caught from the first season that you always wanted to know more about. You were talking about like Hans Zimmer. There's some other people behind the scenes that did some work on this that you might not think about, like a Brad Bird and a Judd Apatow.
Oh yeah. Apatow is what, consulting producer?
I think so.
Yeah, which I don't know exactly what that means, but he did a really great job at it.
Got to start somewhere before you become a director in Hollywood. Got to work your way up the ladder. When I saw Brad Bird, I'm like, is that the same Brad Bird? I couldn't believe, but it's like, hey, he would then go on to do some great films.
Yeah, it looks like Apatow wrote has a story credit on one, and he wrote the Marathon Mensch episode from season 1.
Okay.
So yeah. So it's so cool to see how these all the talent baked into some of these early animated shows. And I think this, as an offshoot of The Simpsons, it makes sense that it would have sort of some talent kind of bleeding over and be pulling from the same pool of kind of comedic voices at the time. But yeah.
How would you rank like the opening credits with the subtle changes here and there? Is that something you got a kick out of? I mean, obviously that's a direct correlation to like The Simpsons and
It's the
doing
couch gag.
chalkboard.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you
No,
have
I
any
loved
personal
all that.
favorites?
I mean, the one I always think of is the alien one that we've already mentioned, because it's just that image from Alien 3 is probably the only thing that everyone can agree on is awesome in Alien 3. and the fact that the fact that this show hones in on that in more or less real time, because Alien 3 was only a couple years old at that point, I think is really cool. And again, it makes me sad that we missed out on additional seasons of this. Like, what would Jay Sherman have to say about the MCU, for example?
Whoa.
Like, I want that
would be great.
His voice kind of tearing into modern cinema. This was every episode. Obviously, his catchphrase is "it stinks," but it's like watching it now. It's like, oh, so this was the original film Twitter, is what this was. The critic just going on, going, it stinks. Everything stinks. This is all terrible. Let's just tear it all down. Burn Hollywood down to the ground. And I think it's really fun to watch it through that lens. And there's there's episode where isn't he hired to write like Ghost Chasers 3, which is obviously a very thinly veiled Ghostbusters 3 thing. And now look at what either one of the Ghostbusters 2 follow-ups has the kind of conversation surrounding those films, and how people are sort of divided on all fronts with that franchise. I think this show was on top of it in the mid 90s. It was basically about 20 years too early on a lot of this stuff. So it's like, I want to know what this show looks like in 2022.
If it was Ghostbusters 2016, I believe his line would be, "If the movie stinks, don't go."
No shit.
And nobody went.
Or to quote the philosopher Tom Servo, end.
Or ding, popcorn's ready.
Oh, Jesus. No, but you're right. Him having to write a sequel to a sequel that he didn't like in the first place,
right?
Which is fucking funny as shit. And then when he finally gets it and has his inspiration, when he hands it to the fucking studio executive, and the executive fucking like cold shoulders him for a week. I'll get around to reading it. Bye.
Doesn't he have like a whole explanation of like, we don't make good movies. It's too good. It's too good a movie for us to make it. Like, it's like, he has a whole, the executive has like a whole spiel about how Hollywood doesn't make good movies because like it can't afford to, or it doesn't, like, that's not what the people want or whatever. And
they don't want to like gamble on it.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
He has like I think he has a script in there that's something like lesbian love story or something like that. Goes like, "Ooh, no, this is too good. You're filing you away or whatever." And then there's that scene with Gene Siskel where he's confronted with Satan, which I thought was really funny.
Oh my God, I love that. We were breaking down favorite scenes. That was my most recent one I watched the other day. I'm like, I just sat there like, yes, that's perfect.
You're the devil, aren't you? Damn you, Siskel.
We shall meet again.
I think they gave both him and Ebert, like, I think they gave them a nice little homage to themselves in this. So I'm really glad they were able to participate, and they had enough sense of humor to join in.
Well, they even brought Roger Shallot in too, which was nice to see.
Yeah.
Which you don't, I don't know if he's still around, but you didn't see him much at that point in time. He was starting to really fade out from the Today Show and all that.
Gumball got hit by a gumball. I'm trying to remember when he was cleaning up the city and the giant ball of gum goes rolling down through the Today Show.
It's Gumball.
Gumball gets hit by a gumball, or death by gumball.
But no, I mean, the conversation about, what would Jay Sherman say, siding with, would he side with people like God, what's his name? Jeff, what's one of the two people I can't stand that keeps bitching about it? I'm drawing a goddamn blank.
I don't even know.
One's Ridley Scott. Who's the other jerk off that keeps running his mouth?
Oh,
Scorsese.
Roland Emmerich? Oh,
Scorsese, Coppola. There's like a lot of them.
all the old
Okay.
school ones.
Let's go over this a couple times. I like Scorsese's films. They're pretty good, but he could shut the fuck up because he's a one-trick pony too. Roland Emmerich, if he doesn't have a fuck ton of money and a computer to make the fucking movie happen, he sucks. You want to know how I know? Watch Making Contact. Watch it. It was just on Mystery Science Theater. And fucking Ridley Scott. Dude, we saw Prometheus. Fuck you. Don't fucking poke jabs or ribs at anybody unless you're going to fucking poke at your own movie. That shit sucked.
Okay, hold on. Prometheus is a good movie. Alien Covenant is where you win that argument. Don't use Prometheus, use Alien Covenant for that.
I didn't watch that one. I left with blue balls having fucking watched Prometheus. I'm
Okay.
like, no goddamn alien.
But I understand. I get your point. I'm just saying, like, I am a fan of Prometheus. They were not allowed to go through with what they were intending to do with the second one. This is studio interference and really not giving a shit anymore. So it was perfect vortex for suckage.
Yeah, but I mean, they're sitting and complaining about movies that make more money, and they make more money not just because more people want to go see them, but because theaters are booking those in larger theaters, and they're getting the smaller movies that they're making, the more artsier films, less and less and less, and a lot of those are only starting to get picked up by places like Netflix, Hulu, or Prime. We talked about that with Steve Wilson a couple weeks ago, and Glenn Maddock and I were just talking about it on Facebook yesterday. Glenn's also from Stampede, of course, that's Brent's brother. And he says all those movies are the same formula. And he's not wrong. They are. But it's not new. It's the same formula that Hollywood has always used. Except for now, cowboys wear capes. And Nazis are Nazis again. So that's cool.
Yeah, unless they're bowling pins and they get run over by Indiana Jones. You know, that helps with our episode here is like the role of the critic now. And is it evolving into Hollywood criticizing itself now? It sounds like they're trying to self-police with all that, but we're all critics here, so we all have an opinion.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, everything is so divided, period, in discourse, regardless of what the topic is. But in film Twitter specifically, yeah, it's why can't people enjoy a Martin Scorsese movie and a Marvel movie? Like, why do I have to choose between Marvel and DC, or which Star Wars or whatever? Like, who gives a shit? It's all there to enjoy. You enjoy it, you don't enjoy it, whatever. Why? It's not the end of the world if you don't. And I think it's interesting. Like, I would love to see Jay Sherman come and somehow be the voice of reason. He's like, yeah, this stinks, it all stinks, who cares? And sort of like democratize that, like break it down and even the playing field there. And by the way, if they were to reboot this now, 100% either Jay Sherman would have a YouTube channel or more likely a podcast. Let's just get that out.
Probably.
I think that'd be outstanding to take that kind of stance instead of being like, oh, hey, we're worried about ratings every episode of The Critic and we got to get that jab in, like, oh my God, I don't want to get canceled. Oh, I don't want to get canceled. Now could be like, you want to cancel me? I'm going right over here to YouTube, buddy.
I do whatever I want. You know, his own little J. Jonah Jameson, where now he's got his own dedicated show where he can rant as often as he wants.
I mean, exactly. That would be fine. I could take like a good, you know, it doesn't have to be 23 minutes. It could be a 15-minute segment every time. That way they could expand the number of episodes. You could cut down on the filler scenes you don't need, characters you don't really need to feature. Just saying.
We have enough crappy movies coming out between reboots, remakes, crappy stories in general, live action remakes of certain things, animated remakes of certain things. There would be no shortage. Oh, and I'm sorry, horrible actors just that are just shitty people that go out and do stupid things and get in trouble. Like, we have no shortage of that right now. Like,
no.
We need this show to like kind of pull everyone's head out of their ass and like see it for one thing for as it is, as being ridiculous, and then also to laugh at it because it's ridiculous. Like, you go through the news and it's like you see a lot of headlines like I don't know who a lot of these actors or singers are now. So it's like, that's one thing. But they start talking about the movies and it's like, I haven't heard of any of this shit, whether it's on Netflix, but there's a lot of stuff that they could work with, especially on Netflix, because half of the movies that come out on Netflix, even if like Army of the Dead, everyone's going to shit on it. Like there's always something to critique for it.
And it's weird that we're in this time where there's endless amounts of content from a bazillion streaming services, or, you know, in addition to the traditional studio system and all of that. And yet anything Netflix or Marvel or whoever puts out, like Bird Box or Tiger King, like everyone's watching the exact same thing because it's there, I guess, right. Even though we live in a world with an unlimited amount of like movies and shows to check out, you just feel obligated to, it's like such blind brand awareness in some regards. And yet other times you're like, no, I'll pick and choose which of these installments. It's very confusing right now. And I think it's having someone like Jay Sherman sort of, as you said, like pull everyone's head out of their asses and just kind of be like, hey, let's all look at this. First of all, number one, you all sound like idiots. Secondly, this is all entertainment. You realize that, right? This is fake people telling fake stories. There's no Death Star. There's no, you know, Avengers. You know that it's made up, right? Like just to make sure we're clear.
Lies.
It's like, and I feel like having a show like this satirize that, I feel like now we need that more than ever. And there's a lot of commentary about entertainment, about film, about television, etc., media in general, but I don't feel like there's a lot of satire that's really taking it on quite so directly and sort of holding a mirror up to the ridiculousness that this has all become.
That's what I was going to actually say as well, is like, we need something like this now. I mean, yes, you got your riff tracks out there. It's not the same. You got your mystery out there. It's not the same. They're not critics. They're accentuating the film that they're watching, or not accentuating the film that they're watching. But yeah, you got all this endless content out there like we're talking about. It's like, restore the balance. It should. I mean, I'm going to do a Yoda there. Like, we need the balance back. We need the inside jokes. We need the funny. We need to relax. We need to breathe. None of us will ever see the end of Netflix or reach the end of Netflix or Amazon Prime or any of that. There was I mean, I'm not going to go all soapboxy, but I remember a time when if you weren't a fan of something, you found something you liked and you talked about that. I mean, you didn't vote, you didn't browbeat the stuff you didn't like. Oh, so I like wrestling. Okay, everybody, browbeat me, go right ahead. I don't care, because I will talk to the people who do care about it. It's like, you can't just focus on the negative all the time. You can say that you don't like something. I've had arguments in junior high, high school, college about Star Trek and Star Wars. But they're amongst people that like the show, so you could have good disagreements. You don't have that anymore with the Twitterverse, as I like to call it. It's all dark side or some light side. I mean, there's a little bit in there of normalcy, but like, you know, everybody's a critic. And if you don't like something, hey, I'm going to scream at you that you don't like it. Bring back some satire. We need it.
Yeah.
Oh, I had somebody completely lose their shit at me yesterday on Twitter, speaking of which, for suggesting that The Sixth Sense is mislabeled as a horror film. And the guy just completely fucking lost his shit. Like, what, did you think it was going to be a musical with no songs? No, it's a suspense thriller. It's not horror. There's nothing horrific about the shit. It doesn't work as a horror film. It's a great movie, but it makes for a really stupid horror film if you fucking look at it that way. And the guy just fucking like was eye twitching and fucking going nuts on me. And he's like, well, it's in the top 100 AFI list for horror films. So I look it up, and it is. It's up in the top 90s, up in the between 90 and 100. And it says in that list, it doesn't work as a horror film. It's a suspense thriller. I'm like, oh, baby should have read first. So you have people that are, what do they used to, how do they call it? Couch quarterbacks or recliner quarterbacks or whatever. That
armchair
quarterbacks. Sorry, I don't watch sports.
That's okay.
I watch hockey. But it's like, people have a fucking opinion where anyone could be a critic now. And that's great. That's what we do. Yeah. We didn't fucking go to school for this shit, But we watch a lot of movies and a lot of TV, and that's kind of like going to school for it, because we watch it and study film. We look into how things were made, why they were made, what it came from. Not everyone seems to do that anymore, but they're willing to call themselves a critic. At that point, call yourself a reviewer, because you're not critiquing anything. You're giving your opinion. Just review it. This is critiquing. Jay Sherman flat out says, it stinks. No, I didn't like it. It stinks. And that's what we need. We need to hear, it stinks.
Is it a good stink or a bad stink? It's up to you to decide. I'm just saying it stinks.
It stinks. Like
it could smell like roses, or it could smell like something else.
Something less than roses. Poopy. No, but it's I don't know. I would like to see this again. I would like to see the Critic again. I would like to see the Critic come back, like you said, like a podcast, doing something that we do. Have people call into Jay and completely lose their shit, like someone just did on me yesterday, because it wound up being kind of funny. Like, I told the guy, dude, the only thing you have fucking convinced me of today is the Sixth Sense scared you as a kid, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry you're a baby. Go play. No, I'd like to see it come back, and I'd like to see good film reviews, not reviews of good films, but good film reviews, good critiques, and kind of hold Hollywood accountable again, because they're not at this point. They're just handing out reboots, remakes, and superhero movies, which I'm not going to ever speak ill of a MCU movie, except for maybe Eternals, but I haven't seen it yet, so I don't know. Hollywood has no accountability for their writers, their actors, or anything like that. They work their contracts horribly. They flush good stories down the toilet, or as you saw in this one, they've got this trap door where all the good scripts go to. And when Jay says, if the movie stinks, just don't go. That scene where the studio executive goes, uh-oh, the jig is up, and jumps out the window. Yeah. How fucking realistic is that? Like, that is the most realistic shit I'd ever seen on this cartoon.
Well, I also liked it when like Duke Phillips was trying to do his invention to make movies more fun for TV, quote unquote. And the whole point at the end was leave the movies as they are. They're art, whether you like them or not. Just leave them. You don't have to mess with them to make them better, because it's not your freaking movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think at the end of the day, this show, as silly, as ridiculous it is, that's kind of what it's trying to say. It's like, hey, let's all, like, it was trying to do in the 90s what I was suggesting that it should do now. It was leveling the playing field. It's like, yeah, we all enjoy this shit. Let's have a good laugh at it. And also, kind of point out some of Hollywood's hypocrisy a little bit along the way. So,
and we can beat up on Arnold a little more too.
Yeah.
Easy target. He's an easy target.
What was that? Rocky 5 versus, or Rocky 6 or 7? Oh God, I'm trying to remember where they were in a boxing match. Rocky something versus like Arnold, and Arnold's got bazookas for boobs or whatever. Oh no, I'm mixing them up. I'm sorry, I'll cut that out.
There's a few of those. What is there's the one where Arnold Schwarzenegger is a rabbi, he sings dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. And there's that one. There's a few. Arnold and Dudley Moore's Arthur pop up like at least a few times each. And it's glorious anytime they do.
Yes. Arthur, whoever did the voice for Arthur was spot on. Dudley Moore. That was, everything was a sick joke and a slur, and it's not slur, but he was slurring, and it's like, it was funny as shit.
Like somebody was paying attention to the mannerisms for all the imitated voices they were doing.
Yeah, you could hear it in the voice actor. Like they were actually moving exactly the way he would if he was drunk and moving around.
There's the one where he's I don't remember if it's Arthur 3 or where it was like, you have acute cirrhosis, and he's like, and you have a cute little bottom. So good.
Someone's going to eat all your popsicles.
Yeah, the popsicles. Oh man, it's great. And also like as a it's weird too, because for me, I was raised, Catholic in a kind of conservative household-ish. And so I was kind of discouraged from watching The Simpsons. So I didn't even really see The Simpsons at the time when it was in its heyday. So this show somehow slipped through the cracks around that time. So I don't remember if I saw it on ABC initially or on Fox or where, but I caught it somewhere along the way. And, this goes in the memory bank along with it, as I mentioned already, Animaniacs and things like that, of like how the kind of humor that you can't pull off in live action, and the artistry that goes into voice acting, and like how amazing it is that they're able to do these, these parodies of, and they say at the end of every episode, celebrity voices are impersonated. Or whatever. No real celebrities were harmed in the making of the show, or something like that.
Yes, I love that.
And those shows were like pivotal in my appreciation for voice actors and for animated comedy. And both of them are sort of satires of the business to a degree. And I think they really kind of helped shape the way I see satire, the way I see comedy, and the way and kind of my appreciation for those art forms. And so that's why when we were talking about what to talk about, and I looked over and I saw my box set of the Critic sitting there, I'm like, oh well, this is an easy choice now, because it was hit me at just the right time. When this came out in '94, I would have been 11, so I was just right in the pocket for the show at that time.
Well, it was sandwiched in between Home Improvement on Wednesdays, so you might have been able to sneak that in a little bit.
Maybe because on ABC was more the family-friendly network in the 90s with the Full House and all that stuff, and then Fox was edgier and had like You're Married with Children's and things like that. Maybe that's how I ended up on my radar.
There you go.
But isn't it funny how what happened with like the cast of Full House, for as wholesome as it's supposed to be?
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Like, not to speak ill of anybody, Jodie Sweetin had a huge drug problem that persisted for years and years and years, and God willing, she's finally past it. It cost her numerous marriages and career work. One of the Olsen twins killed Heath Ledger, and so took that from us. And what else? Let's see. Aunt Becky is a extortionist criminal fraud. And she did 3 hard months of hard time. And Uncle Joey is a pedophile. So whatever. Everyone just went, what? Yes, Uncle Joey fucked Alanis Morissette when she was 15. It's in her book. Look it up, people. That's who she was singing about in that song. Don't give me that look, you guys. You're like, wait, is it? Is it? Yes, it is.
I only had this look because I barely remember that story.
No, they met on Nickelodeon when he was working for them in the mid 80s, and she was doing You Can't Say That on Television, and she was groomed by several people, as it were, at Nickelodeon. He was one of them.
Jeez.
Allegedly, of course.
I didn't hear any dirt on Stamos, or obviously we just lost Saget. I think his big thing was
Saget was watching that show.
Yeah, no one watching that show knew what his comedy was actually like. I think that was the rude awakening for a generation of Full House fans later in life. And then Stamos, I don't know what Stamos's issue is. I'm sure there's something lurking there. Yeah, well, there's that.
I like Bob Saget. I always thought he was a saint, not so much as Danny Tanner, but his comedy is just
as himself.
As himself. His comedy is dirty, but it's not mean. It's just funny. Like, I loved his comedy. Farce of the Penguins is one of the funniest things I'd ever seen. Or you guys have seen Farce of the Penguins, yes?
No, I have not.
Oh my God. Okay.
But now that you said that, I have to look it up. I've heard of it. I'm aware of it. I've just never watched it.
Yeah, me neither.
Instead of being narrated by Morgan Freeman, it is narrated by Sam Jackson.
Oh, I'm sold.
And the voices of the Penguins are Bob Saget, Christina Applegate, Tracy Morgan, and quite a few other people. But it is a rank, dirty, wrong film where it's just stock footage of penguins, and they're saying dirty things while the penguins are doing stuff, and it's just funny as shit.
I love how that premise sounds like it was born from America's Funniest Home Videos, where he would just do voiceover of like the footage that people would send in. I love that too.
Kind of, yeah.
This is now on my list to watch soon.
Written and directed by Bob Saget.
Bob Saget. He was a saint. I'll never say an unkind word about him. But whichever one of the Olsen twins took Heath Ledger from us, God's waiting for you. You know what you did.
Well, this is the third Olsen twin. No, I'm kidding.
The conjoined one. Back to the Critic. I would not say that any of those Bob Saget comedies stink. Definitely see that.
And it looks like we got some social media we can drift on over to, because we did get some feedback from some of our fans out there. First one is from Jacob Dean on Facebook. He says, I don't really remember much about it besides catching it here and there, but the whole network conversation is interesting. Seems like a show that could have been in a whole different category on something that supported darker cartoon material.
I would agree.
Sounds like Comedy Central. I think you were right.
Yeah. It could, if Adult Swim was a lot sooner than it was, I think that might have been a good spot too, but that was still a couple years off. I think didn't I read somewhere that like the webisodes were on like Cartoon Network or Adult Swim in like Spain or something? I don't know. I thought I saw that somewhere.
I know the show had sort of a mild resurgence because of the reruns were on Comedy Central. I remember watching it there before the DVD box set came out.
Oh, okay. And next one is from Jessica Childs in our Facebook group. So do check us out in our Facebook group. We have a fun discussion going on there half the time. The other half, we're acting like a bunch of crazy fools. She says, whoever did the Dudley Moore impression was incredible. I've got a liver the size of coconuts was something I've used to sing before my transplant. So thank you, Jessica, for that comment.
Nice.
Norman Renner on Facebook also said, loved it since day one. Charles Napier does the voice of his boss. And then we got Jeff Zilla on Twitter. I miss the show. It deserved better. We need more Lovitz. Yes, we do.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm interjecting because now I'm going to say we're going to come back to Dial M for Mother. One of our followers and friends, Shane Hood from Twitter, said, hey, I worked on the Critic. Shane was one of the character artists. She did a lot of the layouts drawing John Lovitz and actually got to sit and do a lot of talking with him. She said it was a great show. It was maybe a little ahead of its time. And I told her, yes, it was a lot ahead of its time. But she had told me today that, John Lovitz is just one hell of a card to talk to, like just funny as hell, super nice. She really enjoyed working with him during the time that she got to work on the show. So, but I was just really impressed that randomly, and I missed this quote yesterday when I was doing collections, one of our followers, one of our friends actually worked on the Critic, the show that we're talking about. I'm like, how fucking cool is that?
Yeah, we love to hear from anybody who's worked on these shows or have them on even as well. Like we had Steve on the last one. We had Trace and Frank on our mystery episode. It's nice to have that interaction. So, hey, if there's any other Critic people who worked on the show, you can still reach out to us.
I don't think I can get the any of the main characters from next episode's franchises or movies. We're not going to get that one. I don't think we want one of those. But yeah, we want to get guests in here from how things were made and what it was like. So this was really special. Shane, thank you very much for sharing that with us today. And then the last one that I collected was from Bella Barnes 124, who replied saying, hey, I'm super horny. So are we, Bella. So are we. Thanks for writing
right
in.
place.
Come to the right place.
And that was it. That's all I had for social media. I just wanted to get those two in there.
Well, speaking of social media, Robert, would you tell us where people can check you out, what you do, and where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find both Close Watch and Franchise Detours on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your regular podcatchers, as well as crookedtable.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Crooked Table.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
And buy his book already. Damn.
Buy my book. Buy my book.